Imagine a military operation so vast it changes the course of history. Could you picture that? This was the reality of Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II, was a game-changer. It shaped the Eastern Front and the overall course of the war. In this video we will analyze the successes and failures of both the Axis and Soviet forces year by year. Join us as we delve into the details of this monumental operation. The year is 1941. The German forces launched their invasion with the blitzkrieg tactics. Imagine, if you will, the mighty Wehrmacht, the German army, like a coiled spring, ready to unleash its power. The blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was their chosen method of attack, a rapid, concentrated offensive intended to shock and disorient the enemy, and shock it did. Their advance was swift and brutal, capturing vast territories with alarming speed. Brest, Minsk, Kiev, all fell in quick succession to the German onslaught. These encirclement battles, as they were known, were instrumental in the initial successes of the Germans. The Soviet defenses, caught off guard, were shattered, their lines broken, their forces scattered. But the German advance was not without its challenges. The vastness of the Soviet Union, coupled with its harsh weather conditions, posed significant logistical issues. Supply lines stretched thin and German troops found themselves increasingly exposed the further they advanced into enemy territory. On the other side, the Soviet Union was in disarray. Taken by surprise, the Red Army struggled to mount a coherent defense. Key cities and territories were lost, and large-scale encirclements resulted in the capture of vast numbers of Soviet troops. The situation was, to put it mildly, bleak. The leadership was in chaos. Stalin, having purged much of his military leadership in the late 1930s, found himself with a command structure ill-equipped to deal with the German threat. Disorganization was rampant, and the lack of a clear strategy allowed the Germans to make significant inroads into Soviet territory. But amid the setbacks, there were glimmers of hope. The Soviet people, known for their resilience, began to rally. Factories were moved east, away from the front lines, to continue the production of war material. The Red Army, though battered and bruised, was not defeated. By the end of 1941, the Soviet Union is reeling, but they're not out of the game yet. The stage was set for a titanic struggle, a clash of ideologies and national wills that would shape the course of the Second World War, and indeed, the rest of the 20th century. As we move into 1942, the German forces continue their push. The Wehrmacht marches eastward, their eyes set on two significant targets: the life-giving Volga River and the oil-rich Caucasus. The German High Command sees these areas as key to crippling the Soviet war machine and securing a swift victory. Stalingrad, a city on the banks of the Volga, becomes a focal point for both sides. The city holds immense strategic importance, not just for its location on the river but also for its psychological value. Named after Joseph Stalin himself, its capture would deal a massive blow to Soviet morale. However, the German offensive is not without its challenges. The vast distances and harsh climate of the Eastern Front take their toll on the German troops, slowing their advance. Yet they press on, driven by their belief in quick victory. But on the other side of the front, the Red Army is not sitting idle. The Soviets, despite their earlier losses, are showing signs of resilience. They establish formidable defensive lines at the Volga and around Moscow, digging in their heels and refusing to give an inch. The Soviets also begin to mobilize their vast reserves, pouring fresh troops into the fray. The sheer scale of this mobilization is a testament to the Soviet Union's industrial might and the determination of its people. In November, the Soviets launch Operation Uranus, a counteroffensive designed to encircle and trap the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad. Despite the German forces' fierce resistance, the Soviets succeed in surrounding them by the end of the month. The German Sixth Army, once the spearhead of the invasion, finds itself trapped in the very city it sought to capture. The situation at Stalingrad marks a turning point in Operation Barbarossa. The German forces, once seemingly unstoppable, are now on the defensive. The Red Army, which had been retreating and reeling from losses, is now launching successful counterattacks. The tide of war begins to turn at Stalingrad. In 1943, the scales of war tip in favor of the Soviet Union. Imagine a pendulum swinging back and forth. The momentum of Operation Barbarossa, which had initially carried the German forces deep into Soviet territory, began to wane. It was in this crucial year that the pendulum's swing started to slow, then stop, before beginning its inexorable shift in the opposite direction. German forces, once the hunters, found themselves on the retreat. Their losses mounted, particularly on the southern and central fronts. The once formidable blitzkrieg, a storm of steel and fire that had swept across Europe, seemed to lose its ferocity. The German Wehrmacht, which had once seemed invincible, was now being pushed back step by step, mile by mile. And then, there was the Battle of Kursk. This was not just any battle, it was the largest tank battle in history. The thunderous roar of engines, the deafening blasts of cannon fire, the churned-up earth, and the grim determination of the men involved, all combined to create a spectacle of war on a scale never seen before, or since. Yet despite the sheer magnitude of the conflict, the outcome was decisive. The German forces were repelled, their armored spearhead blunted against the resilient Soviet defenses. With this victory, the strategic initiative began to shift towards the Soviet Union. The pendulum had completed its swing, the hunted had become the hunter. On the other side of the front, the Soviet forces were on the offensive. Cities and territories, once under the heel of the Axis forces, were liberated one by one. The Red Army was not just content to push back the invaders, they pursued them, harrying their retreat with a tenacity that was as relentless as it was effective. The Soviet Union, which had borne the brunt of the Axis onslaught in the initial stages of Operation Barbarossa, was now turning the tables. The tide of war was changing, and with it, the fate of millions. 1943 was the year when the Soviet Union began to write a new chapter in the annals of World War II. This was not just a simple reversal of fortunes. It was a testament to the resilience, the courage, and the determination of a people who had been pushed to the brink, yet refused to fall. With the end of 1943, the Soviet Union begins its relentless push towards Eastern Europe. Looking back at Operation Barbarossa, it's clear that it was a pivotal point in World War II. The operation, which started with the German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, marked a significant turning point in the war. The German forces, with their blitzkrieg tactics, initially made rapid territorial gains, encircling key Soviet cities such as Brest, Minsk, and Kiev. However, the Soviet Union, despite being caught off guard, managed to recover and mount a strong defense. The year 1942 saw the German forces pushing towards the Volga and the Caucasus, but the tide turned with the Battle of Stalingrad. This marked a strategic turning point with the defeat and surrender of the German Sixth Army. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, with its mobilization of reserves and strategic counterattacks, demonstrated remarkable resilience and strategic acumen. By 1943, the strategic initiative had shifted to the Soviet Union. With the liberation of key cities and territories, and the relentless pursuit of retreating Axis forces, the Soviets began their push towards Eastern Europe. In conclusion, Operation Barbarossa, despite its initial successes, ultimately led to a series of strategic failures for the Axis powers. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, despite its early setbacks, managed to turn the tide of the war. The operation had a profound impact on the course of World War II, shaping the Eastern Front and influencing the overall outcome of the conflict. Operation Barbarossa, a campaign of unprecedented scale, left an indelible mark on the history of warfare. So concludes our journey through Operation Barbarossa. We've delved into its impact, its triumphs and failures. We invite you to share your thoughts and opinions. Stay tuned for our upcoming content on more fascinating historical events.